What's up people, my name's Anton and welcome to September. Today I'm going to be taking you through this candle setup inside of C4D and Octane. We're going to be taking a look at quite a few different techniques today. We're going to be making this scene from scratch, taking you through some gobo, directional lighting techniques, a little bit of UV mapping, slight bit of composition, modelling, and a little bit of texture generation as well, so you can really put your texture where you want on objects and models and get a look which looks pretty similar to this. Hope you guys enjoy. Gonna get straight in with a new project. So before we get started here, I figured I'd just really quickly run over the importance of references when you're working with 3D renders like this. A lot of the time, especially if you're really going for realism, you don't really want to be working with no reference. Specifically for this one, I actually saw or got this idea of this candle from a shop that I was in London. And I saw this and I'll look at sort of concrete and a lot of materials which have imperfections, sometimes nature a lot of the time, and start thinking about how I could generate this in 3D. And hands down, the best way to do it is have a photo up in front of you where you can see light. And for example, when I look at this, the way I'm thinking is these shadows, which obviously like sort of like darker blue. Obviously that's more natural tones coming from light, and it's got some warm light on the left. Not that I try to replicate it, but the little nuances that you sort of want to pay attention to when you're either replicating or going for a realism approach, whether that's for motion reel work, VFX, personal projects, whatever. It always looks best that way, I found. And pretty much all my work has references, so I figured that I might start actually pulling them up so you guys know what I'm working on, you know the way my brain's working. But without further ado, we're going to cut off the old render and start on a new one. So, just like normal, we're going to start the modelling. Step one, we're going to hop and get a capsule. We're going to turn up the rotation segments, cap segments, and height just a little bit. Hit C on that, head into the alternate view. Make sure you've got the rectangle selector up here, and just select the topology that we don't need. So I'm going to get to about here, just hit delete on the keyboard, and then we're left with our hollow sphere. What we're going to do from this point is obviously add a little bit of thickness to it. We're going to grab a cloth surface just here, whack the capsule in and set this to about 220 is a little too high, something about 10, and this gives us at this point a pretty good starting position with our geometry that we can then play with. If we just head back into object mode, we can see that we've got a pretty good shape. If we just obviously bear in mind our reference, this isn't the exact shape that we're going for. It's a little too short, and the center candle that I had in mind particularly was a little more rounded. So what we need to do from this point is just some little tweaking to get the kind of shape that we want. We can start by scaling it up like, hold on, just hop into here. Start by, as you see, it's already hollow and everything, no volume builder necessary, so we can really get going. We can tweak this up a little bit just like this. At this point my observations are that the bottom is a little too rounded, especially if it's meant to be balancing. So from there what you can do is hop back into a polygon mode like this, go about selecting an area which you want to edit and selectively scale. You want to bear with, there we go. Selectively scale this area down just a little bit, or even better, the more you select, typically the smoother the outcome will be. So if we went to about here and then scaled that down, maybe more like this, just to make sure our topology isn't getting messed up at all. Look at that. We can either, it's still a little too short, so we can either move that down just here, or it may be better just to scale the whole thing just a tad up like this. It's create a nice little taper towards the bottom there without it being completely rounded off like a capsule. We can save that and just switch to raw shading so we know what we're working with. At this point, we want to add a little, maybe a little bit of a bulge, so we can use some creative little C4D techniques here. We can either get a bulge like this, make sure this is, fits rather, wrong way around, make this fit to parent here, and we can mess with the strength to get us where we want. So we want I say a very slight bulge, very, very slight. You can either fillet it just to give it more a curve, but it tends to be a little bit too much. And from that point, we can also add a potentially a taper of some sort. Get rid of that bend. My mouse is double clicking all over the place. And we can just put a taper in there, fit that to parent as well. And we can very slightly combat that with a bulge. Get a little bit of curvature on. If you don't really want to do that, I'd say maybe give the fillet a shot. But ultimately, I think this is the sort of look we're really going for. You can right click on this, make that connect objects and delete. Make sure these are activated, connect objects and delete, just like that. And if there's any final sort of scaling you want to do, you can. But really, I'd say we're getting pretty close to the result that we want. So from this point, what you can do is just take a final look at your geometry. Little observations I'm looking at here is that the edges are a little bit too sharp. So there's a few ways we can do that. Depending on the scale of the geometry itself, you can chuck that into a subdivision surface, and in this case, that's done a pretty good job. But you don't want it to be too rounded at the top like that. I remember in the previous project, the best way I did to combat that was to hit C on it, because I love the rounded look of the subdivision surface. Getting a cube and positioning that just above like this, then heading into volume builder, dragging this in, dragging the cube just on top like that, and subtracting the cube from this, setting this to about 1 or 2. And what it does is, unintentionally, but this will come into play later, you get this sort of rough look here, which is to do with voxels, and it's to do with the fact there's no smoothing. And sharp edges like that tend to sort of have that look with voxels and pixels, but it serves us. So what we're going to do is we're going to hit C on that, we're going to use this, and this is going to be the model that we're going to use. So from this point, we can start thinking about Octane and setting up our scene a little more. Lastly, quick scale never hurt no one. And we've got a pretty nice candle shape here. We can filter whatever we like, and we can start texturing away. The look that I was going for specifically was a clean concrete look, and I stand by that. I think it looked really nice. It was one of the reasons I liked the hold on, I'm quick Photoshop my laptop, and I'm hoping this is gonna calm the fans down a little bit. Nice one. So we're going for a clean concrete look. I think it looks really good. It helped with composition, and it was one of the things that I really wanted to try and replicate. So what we're going to do is we are going to hop in here. We're going to do same as every time, aces, path tracing. We're going to set the resolution here to about 1000 by 1000. Make sure we're running an Octane, and set this to lock. We can start thinking about our camera a little bit now as well, just because it saves us doing it later. We can set the focal length. Another little tip, I very rarely use focal length of 36. For some reason it's like super cheesy, it reminds me of YouTube intros. So I sort of set it to about 100, and then move back and adjust as I like. So we'll run with this for now. You can get a pretty good sense of composition from here. We're just going to center it so we get some good levels of detail and whatnot, and it should be sweet. And we can start thinking about the concrete. So quickly, this is going to come into contact later when we work with positioning the label itself, but we need to hop in here and go into UV edit and refresh these UVs. So this is my approach to UV in Cinema 4D, and it is as simple as deleting the UV tag, heading to paint setup wizard, make sure this is selected, and R26 it looks like that, hitting optical actually automatic pat UVs does a good job too, and setting both of these numbers to 4096, which is the magic VFX resolution when it comes to texturing, substance paint, or anything. Use 4096. It always encapsulates enough detail. So it's pretty simple geometry, so that shouldn't take too long. And if we click on this, see, now the reason for that was that automatic UV mapping. So we need to paint setup wizard next, optical cubic mapping. Same values there. Click continue, and here is our UVs that we're going to work with. So this will not be relevant for now, but will be later. So we can hop out of UV edit and back into Octane now, hoping our settings will save, which of course they have. And you can delete this material here. I'm not entirely sure that's relevant, although it may be worth keeping for now, just when we export into Substance Paint now. Hit render in Octane just so we see what we're working with, and here we are. Do you want to say the change of the project? Yes. Ooh. Yes, please. Yes, please. Yes, please. Right. We can delete this material. We are going to get a little bit of light involved. So same as before, head into Objects, HDRI Environment, hop into here, get our trusty HDRI up, which always works nicely. Ooh. Hits nicely. Head to commercial locations, creative office, drag that right in there. So there's 2 Aces CG, and we have our light already there. We can duplicate this real quick, set this to clear, although I'm not entirely sure if we'll need this because we won't be seeing the background anyway. And we can just adjust our light somewhere that works. Right, so at this point we can start generating our concrete material. So I've already got the textures all set up and saved, but if we just create a universal material, drag this straight onto the candle once it's ready, just like this, just like this. Make sure it's set to UV mapping, so we're using the UVs that we just made, and you can start seeing reflections come up. Obviously we want to change those, but we can go here, hop right in there. We can head to our candle textures, drag these 3, drag these 3, double click in, always pain, drag them in just like this. So we've got our base color just here, make sure that's set to Aces, pop that in albedo. We have our normal, so we can chuck that in normal, and we have our roughness, I believe, which we can chuck into roughness, and we can start to see the concrete look that we're getting there. At this point, things that I think about doing are transforming it a little bit. So what we can do is we can head here, go to UV transform, make sure we plug that node into all through. Make sure we plug that node into all 3, and we can go about scaling this down just a little bit. So we get the pitted concrete, just highlighting some nice little tones and not being too high red. So we've also got a really nice glow under here, which comes from not having the HDRI, and I'm guessing some of the warmer tones of the HDRI itself, but just a little observation. At this point, I'd almost think these were a little bit too bright, but I don't actually think they are. In the reference photo, these shadows would be a little bit cooler, but my only option for really changing that in Octane very easily would be to hop and try see if we can change this in the node editor. So this is our raw HDRI here, and if we were to try and make this a little cooler, we'd have to chuck in a color correction, I believe, which is reset it. In actuality, I'm wondering if it's better to do it in post. So we've got 2 choices here. We could either, I think we'd have to color correct it and then rebake the HDRI to plug into the texture, or we could edit it and then it would send it to Photoshop. We'd save a replacement EXR and use that. But I believe it may well be better to just edit in post after, for the sake of argument, for the sake of the tutorial. I didn't actually do that for the first one. This is just an ongoing sort of decision, but we can go from here to thinking about, so you can sort of see some of these roughness spots here which work really well. We can go about making a quick plane. So if we just make the floor, hop here, we'll make sure we're not saying, but this doesn't want to move very easily for some reason. Hold on, it's almost as if, yeah, all right, sweet. So we can just drag this down and just move this out and out. In fact, just so we're filling up the background the way we want to, you can set this to about 2000 and 2000. And here is our background. So now we have the clay on the floor. We can go about making even a floor texture, I suppose. So we can, hold on, quickly, I think, didn't realise this, but there may actually be, beautiful, Beckman, there may be some metallic on this. Nah, there isn't any metallic on this. The only thing is that the specularity is, thought it may have been a little high, but seems to be working okay. We've got sheeners, coating layer. When you're working with universal materials like this, there's always little things that you don't see that end up having an effect. Just like that, for example, there was something there, but if you set it to diffuse, you really get that that concrete look back. So we're going to leave it with that. Always tweak with Octane, man. These render engines, you got to work with them. It's not the renders themselves, it's how the artists use them. So we're going to hop and make just one more material. We could duplicate this, but I'm not going to. We can make a new diffuse material. The concrete itself that we're using here is quite light, so by common sense what you do is make a darker background for composition purposes. So if we head here, if we just take a look to try and find some sort of darker concrete texture that we can potentially use, we can head to design here. Ooh. Make sure we're working where we want to work. Not having it. Mouse is all over the place today. Head to other files and maybe something here. We've got some dirt. In fact, let's just grab some of these, move these in here like that. Honestly, when it comes to this kind of stuff, I just find files that are anywhere on my PC that have accumulated. We can set this to aces. Let's drag that into diffuse real quick. Set the normal down. And the, what's this? Roughness. Sweet. We can go about scaling this down just a little bit because the UV mapping don't really matter too much on this. Just so we're working with something that it goes hand in hand nicely. So this is 30 and 30 maybe. And the paint splats actually look really nice. This itself is a little too bright. So what we'd want to do is this may actually be a dirt map, so we can go about color correcting this a bit. We can hop in here, tweak the gamma, so we're working with a much darker background. In fact, you can even bring the colors like this, they're a little more similar. Play with the contrast up or down. I say it looks better down, and just tweak it down with the brightness, so we can turn the gamma up just until we get a result we really like. Something like this actually looks pretty good. Just making sure we're getting the contrast that we want. Maybe just a little bit brighter, and then we can start thinking about adding the label. Cool. So this works. This works nicely. Obviously the colors themselves, you're better off using color, I'd say, in situations like this, more so than, for example, depth of field, separating the foreground from the background, purely because it looks a little sharper, it looks better, and it's one less thing that you have to replicate, just our composition, right? So we got our base skeleton here. From this point, what we can do is we can think about, like I said, chucking the label on. So I actually have a pre-made label, which I use purely because I was working off the reference, and the label I used was like this. And the way you go about getting this on the candle specifically, you're gonna open. Yeah, so it's just like this. Santal 26, it was a French company, so we got some French in there. Bougerie Parfumé, Hamburg in USA, Le Labo, la 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 la. The way you want to use this to really get on exactly where you want it in the candle is through Substance Painter. So the way you do that is you need to export our model that we just made and UV'd. We can open up a new project, paste that in really quickly. You want to hit File, Export as FBX, just here, and click OK. Just do candle tutorial. And then hop into Substance Painter just here. You can go to dump, wherever you find that candle, just like this. And this is where you can move that into here like that. Make sure it's on 496. That's where all the continuation comes in, and it's going to open our candle right up in Substance Painter like this. Easiest thing I found to do was make sure you go to File, Import Resources, Add Resources, find where your label is, and there are little things that come up here. You need to click Alpha. You know what? For the sake of explanation, I'm going to do it. We're going to go September, candle label, open. You can go under Find Alpha, import your resources to current session, import. And what will happen is, make sure you're on a new layer on Substance Painter. Pick a material which suits the look that you're going for. So for me, it was almost like a worn concrete on top of the lighter concrete. I think I picked something like this. You can even draw on to see what you're working with. Something like this works quite well. Maybe something a little darker, but no, we'll stick with what we used before. And what you want to do is alpha is what the shape of the brush that you're actually painting in. So if you find what you imported, so for me it was this candle thing, position it right where you want it, and you should maybe a little bit smaller, not too close to the top, not too close to the bottom, somewhere around here. You should literally be able to print your, maybe a little lower. You should be able to print your thing on. You know, it's important to find a position where the UVs aren't distorted at all, because you can always rotate in C4D, but you can't rotate with the UVs. And just like that, maybe even slightly bigger and slightly smaller, slightly lower even. Perfect, something like that. At this point, if you want to tweak sparingly in Substance Painter, I'd say, because only acknowledgement is that I don't know if anyone saw that, but the print was coming over 2 UVs, so you may be better off doing something like that. All right, sweet, we'll work with this. At this point, if you want to, it's tweak sparingly in Substance Painter, because the render that shows here doesn't usually correlate with Octane too well. It always ends up looking a little bit different, and then you end up using color correction in Octane, and it's always a pain. But from my observation, I might make this a little bit darker. Easiest way to do that is just go to concrete color down here and make that not quite black, but a very dark gray. Just remember where we put it, somewhere like here. And I'd say that's a pretty good running point that we can use. So at this point, you can hit export textures. In fact, you know what? We can cross that bridge when we come to it. You want to hit export textures. Go here, make sure you're selecting. There isn't an Octane tab, but you can hit Redshift, which is the next best thing. Pick whatever folder you want to use it and export it straight out. And what that's going to do is put that label in the UVs exactly where we want it on the candle. So we can drag it right into Octane, and it's going to work like a charm. We can hit Open Output Directory just here, hop into Octane, make sure we're in our material node, find the material we were using. That's the copy. If we start rendering, just so we know we're in the right place. Yep. We can then open our Octane material, go into Node Editor, and this is going to take a little bit of material tweaking, but it shouldn't be too hard to do. We can go here, or rather find our export, which is this color tab here. This is grey, which is an issue, unfortunately, with the technique we're going to use in Octane. So we need to open that in Adobe Photoshop really quickly and do a quick little technique. So if we zoom in, we can see exactly where this is positioned nicely. We need to hit Select Color Range. This is also how you remove any one color in Photoshop, by the way. We just select the background, hit OK, delete on our keyboard, or rather, that's fill, never mind. Make sure this is unlocked down here. Oh, hold on. Reposition my mouse, hit delete on the keyboard, and that's going to make it into a PNG. We can hit File, Export, Quick Export is PNG. Candle to Universal one color, just hit Replace, it doesn't matter. Head into Octane just here, and we can drag our PNG'd texture in. So, as you can see, if you were to, we want this texture to be overlaid on top of the concrete texture here. Best way of doing that is opening up an add node, better than a mix node, because the add will actually take away, or rather, instead of mixing 2 textures 50-50, the add will overlay onto that using colors, and you know the way add works, it removes black. So we can move that into texture 1, Move that to texture 2 and chuck this into the fuse really quickly, and we can see exactly where that is. Something important is that this needs to be set to alpha, I believe, and we can see, if we hop out of our camera, we can see exactly where that label's gone. First observation that we can obviously see is that it's in white, which is what we want. We want it to be black. So if we rotate this around just a little bit, got the Santal 26 right there, exactly where we want it, but we need to make it black. And this is an issue that I had with the previous render. A little bit of problem solving was necessary here, and I'm going to show you exactly how I did it. So my issue was this was a PNG, and if I inverted this, the entire thing would be inverted. So it's basically putting white there and concrete everywhere else, if that makes sense. And the second I inverted that, it would be white everywhere else and concrete in the middle. And obviously we want this black. So I was thinking, how do I go about doing this? And the way was to invert it, right? So it's just a little like this. What you want are a few color correction nodes. So we can chuck one in right at the end. And we want to invert this just to see what we get. And we get a concrete result, except the concrete here has a slight blue tint because of the light. And this is actually interesting. So I remember with my last one, I had to consciously tint the concrete here using a colorizer node just here to make it a little more yellow. I might still do that, but for some reason when I invert here, it's actually giving me almost like a slightly green, but it is giving me the look that I want. In principle, this is what I was looking for. You can take this texture and you can mess with the power a little bit, make it ACG if you need to, but it's obviously an alpha. You can tweak this up and down like this, so it looks like it's printed more on the concrete, just like that. I'd say 0.5 is a pretty good value. In fact, I kind of like the way you can see through the concrete there, so maybe like 0.4, 0.35 we'll go for, 0.35. And we have our printed label on our candle. We can then hop back into the camera just here, do a little bit of skillful rotating so we know exactly where we're working. And you can see we're already getting a really clean result. We're getting a really clean, sort of minimalistic, almost marble, concrete, rustic-esque result, which looks really tidy. Only thing standing out between this and the other render was that the floor is different and it's a little more contrasty. So I kind of want to dull it out a bit if I can. The way I go about doing that is obviously contrast is all the way down. We could really gamma it up and then turn, gamma it down even, but it's all a bit doing this, but it doesn't seem to be working in my favor too much. And at this point you're working with really small values purely because the gamma is so low. You could narrow down the saturation, just the hue, gain maybe a little bit. Maybe the gain would do it. But in principle, we're getting a pretty good idea of the setup. So now is the last little bit, and it's just adding a few more little lights to add interest to the piece whilst bearing in mind the composition. And this is always a pain, but I'm going to try do it. You can follow Grayscale Gorilla tutorials on how to set up gobos properly, but gobos are essentially natural looking light that looks like it's fallen through blinds or nature or plants to fall on a piece, and adds a sense of realism, which is really, really, really good light. It typically looks amazing. So I'm going to use those assets in this tutorial. What you need to do is you need to firstly create an Octane light. If we just go all lights, Octane area light just here. Amazing. So that's our light, obviously far too bright, but it exists, which is the main thing. We can hop out of our camera really quick and just go into a third person view so we see what we're working with. Now gobos tend to be really big, and they need to reflect in just the right way. So if you right click here on the light, little tip, go animation tags, target, and then just select the thing. That means that as you move this around, it's now going to target that, which is perfect, which is exactly what we need. So if we just move this up and scale it very, 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 very high, maybe something like this. We can move it up to about here. Take it out. We can set our black HDRI to primary, so that all we see is that Octane light. And it'll help us pinpoint exactly how we want it to look. So at this point, we need to set up the gobo. So we can head into Grayscale Gorilla here, plus library, find our gobos and find something that we're after. For this, I think I used a regular blind. So if we just go into maybe something like this. We head into Octane here, distribution, click on this and set this to Octane image texture. Hop into image texture, drag your blinds in just like that. At this point, you want to go into projection, I believe. Set this to XVW, and that's going to let you scale up and down the UV, but it's far too blurred and nowhere near specific enough. It's just general light is the best way for you to think about it at this point. So what you want to do is you want to head into, I think you want to turn surface brightness off, if I believe. And you want to go in here, try, because there's always little settings that you have to tweak here. You can scale this up a little bit. If you rotate, you can actually see specifically what you're looking for there. And you want to turn your surface brightness up a little bit. So you can make this about 100, or maybe 200 rather. We're wanting this to look like light is actually shining through, so it may be a case of going into the details here and setting this to 1 and 1, and that has done it perfect, just the way we want it. So at this point, it is just a positioning and tweaking thing. The positioning doesn't actually do too much. It's mostly in the UV mapping, but you can see that light actually looks like it's falling through blinds onto the scene now. If we head into the thing and go to UV mapping, we can scale it down just like this. Hop into our camera. Bear in mind we've got HDR on top of this, but we're getting a really nice look from this gobo here. Big props to Grayscale Gorilla. Genuinely trying to put value out there with my own content, and here I am using their assets all the time, so that should tell you enough. If you position it just right, you can really get it to hit on the label, which is what I liked, and obviously the background. At this point, what you want is what I found. The lighting from the HDRI was quite cool, so I wanted something to contrast that. Cool as in cold. So what I wanted to do was turn this on, and then you see how they work together. But I wanted to make this a little bit warmer. So what I did was actually turn the warmth down a little bit, and you got a really nice look, which I don't even think is that far off the original render. If I'm not wrong. Hold on. Yeah, big ups. Not too shabby. This one went a little wider, but this one's, I feel like this is a nicer shape, and that's pretty much how to get this kind of result. Obviously, if you're rendering out, make sure you're rendering out in ACES like normal. Make sure you got it selected all up here. If you want to use it for whatever you can, you are absolutely welcome. And yeah, that's how you make your scented candle. You can go by rotating this a little more, obviously, wherever you want, however you want to do it. But that label is there. You can edit the label. You can rejig it in Substance Painter and then replace the file in the node editor here, and you'll be able to change your result and write whatever you want in here. But for now, this is the final product. Hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next episode.